At the current time, I'm really excited just about our efforts in prototyping and trying new things. One of the big goals with Dead Space 2 is to improve on what we did with the original game. So going through and just trying different mechanics, finding out what works, going through the focus testing process, getting feedback from people that have played the game and the previous game, Dead Space, and people that have never played it is really interesting and hopefully will really help us craft a very special and great follow-up.
What I'm most excited about in terms of Dead Space 2 at this stage of the production is it's still early enough that all kinds of things are possible, and we're really going for a lot more diversity. Dead Space 1 looked great, but we got a lot of fans said, hey, that's awesome, but it was kind of one thing. Like the beginning of the game looked like the end of the game, and it kind of, by the end of it, you're like, okay, like I get it, brown spaceship. This time we're going for much, much more variety, all in the characters, in the worlds, in everything. And we're at that stage now where we've got someone that we think are really hot, but there's a chance to still use new ones and get inspired by new things. So this stage, right at the end of pre-production, where we know what the game's going to be and what it's sort of asking to be, but there's still time to kind of respond and make it even better and try out new stuff. That's why I really like this phase of the production.
On Dead Space 2, I'm really excited about the new action horror focus. I think that adding these big action moments to the great horror that we did on Dead Space 1 is going to make it an even better experience for the consumer. I'm excited about some of our new NPCs, some of our new monsters, some of our new mechanics. I think Zero G is the fans are going to really like what we're going to do with Zero G. I think the story is going to be I think we're going to take the story to the next level on Dead Space 2. Those are some of the things I think people are going to really like.
The design of Isaac from the first game, we were really trying to thread the needle there, because there's a lot you sort of have to communicate about what he's about, and how do you make someone that's armored but vulnerable and has to look different than things that have happened before. And of course we were trying some really cool new stuff like displaying his health on him and no HUD and all that kind of business. And we ended up with some really iconic elements in terms of the horizontal face lights and the rig on his back and the ribbing that I think led to a really strong overall feeling. So now what's cool is, now we can try a bunch of stuff. In the first game, there were 5 suits plus a bunch of bonus ones and stuff, but really they were kind of like the evolution of one suit, right? He got more stuff on it, it got a little more cooler. This game, though, completely different. All kinds of different suits available that all sort of speak to new things and new looks, but that iconography that we developed in the first game, the rig and some of that sort of stuff, really sort of maintains a through line, and you're like, that's still Dead Space, that's still Isaac, I get it, but now that we have that solid foundation, we can try cool new stuff.
In Dead Space 1, you were on the Ishimura, which was an abandoned ship in space. In Dead Space 2, you're going to be in a much bigger environment. It's called the Sprawl, which is a huge space station, like a city in space. And so we can show people the horror of, the horror of a much larger population getting attacked by the necromorph infestation. The opportunities for horror are much greater in this bigger environment. And plus you get to see sort of the slice of life of what our picture of life in the future is like. So you don't have to have played Dead Space 1 to enjoy Dead Space 2. I think people will, we're going to introduce people to our universe, let them know what's going on. And there's a lot of, even people who have played Dead Space 1, there's a lot they're going to have to figure out about what's going on in this new environment. So it'll be something for everybody, old fans and people who are new to the franchise.
Well, in Dead Space 2, we want to take dismemberment even farther than we did in Dead Space 1. And that means that a lot of new enemies that we're designing have some very unique dismemberment strategies to them. I can't talk too much about the specifics of those enemies, but we're trying really hard to make sure that we have some really unique twists on dismemberment. Going farther than that, though, we want to make sure that the player feels like after these enemies terrify him and after they kill him time and time again, that the player can sort of get revenge on them at times. And so we've designed some mechanics that make you feel like you can sort of torture them a little bit and give them what they're giving to you.
So the cross-media element of the original Dead Space and how we actually went out and did things with comics and the animated feature really was an interesting and new thing that we've done at Visceral. And it allowed us to play more in the storyline and create more fiction for fans of the franchise. And it's been incredibly useful for us because it kind of forces us to think very broad about what we're doing. Like, we're not just focused on one part of the story so that later we get caught up with, you know, fictional mistakes. We're really mapping out everything in the universe. So it's been very positive having to think about those extensions that we've been doing. And as a gamer and a fan of just games in general, I think it's really neat because when I can put down a game and finish it, there's something else that can keep me in that world. And I like that stuff. Personally, like, you know, when going back to D&D, right, there were the Forgotten Realms books and things like that. And I used to always just, because I like to think about, you know, my favorite games and my favorite activities. So being able to like read a book about it and kind of, you know, imagine different settings was really fun for me. So hopefully other, you know, avid gamers enjoy the fact that we're doing that stuff.
I would say to anybody who's played the other Dead Space games and seen the animated feature and read the comics, that there's still a lot of surprises in store in Dead Space 2. You know, one of the things about Dead Space is that even if you know a lot about the Church of Unitology, and even if you've studied up on all of the marker lore and about what all the characters are and the timeline of all the events that take place in Dead Space, there's still the factor of people and the story of how people interact. So in Dead Space 2, you know, all those elements of the Church of Unitology and the marker, the necromorphs, there's still that. But what you won't expect are the characters that we introduce and, you know, the conflicts that are introduced because of their agendas. So I think because Isaac is going to be a much more important character in Dead Space 2, he's going to talk. There's just going to be a lot more interesting character conflict, and that's not something that even if you know all the other Dead Space media that you're going to really be able to predict.
Well, I think the support from EA in general has been fantastic for the franchise overall. Certainly when we started Dead Space, we were kind of a renegade group of people, a very small team, and really having to prove what we were doing every step of the way. With, you know, the critical success of the previous game, it's got a lot of people around the company very excited, very supportive. And so I would say things are a little bit different, but it's all for the better. And it's just really exciting to know that we come into the studio every day here at Visceral and know that the company's behind what we're doing 100%, and it's absolutely fantastic.